Okay, we're back. It's Mike Brennan, and we have another episode of MITech TV. We're actually kicking off a new series today. We're working closely with ITC Transmission Company. If you see the big transmission lines all over the place, that's most likely theirs. And so we're going to be kicking off a year-long series, and we have with us Simon Whitelocke, who's the president of ITC Michigan. And we're going to be taking a look at a lot of stuff. But the background for today's show is the demand. I'm reading this. I still have my glasses on. The demand for our state and nation to move to carbon neutrality and realize clean energy goals is aggressive. We're also seeing major auto manufacturers pledging to build more electric vehicles and the push to electrify our homes, business, and all the rest. So at the federal level, we also have the Infrastructure Investment Act, hopefully going forward this year. And it's intended to provide the needed infrastructure to support these goals. So, Simon, you've been on this show a couple times now, haven't you?
I have. Thanks for having me, Mike and Matt. Appreciate being here.
Sure. All right. So let me kick it off with we have had you on the show. Let's remind our audience what your role is in the energy industry.
Yeah, ITC, we're a transmission-only company. So what that means is we are the big towers and lines that move electricity from where it's generated to where it's actually consumed. So I think of the system as having three parts, and we're kind of right in the middle. And we're the nation's largest independent transmission company, and that gives us the opportunity to be transmission experts. But at the end of the day, what we do is we build and maintain the transmission infrastructure here in the Lower Peninsula of Michigan, as well as in 7 other states in the Midwest.
Well, thanks for that overview. Today, with your appearance here today, we're talking about renewable energy. We watched a video from the website Vox, the news website Vox recently, that made claims about why the U.S. isn't ready for clean energy. They focused on examples like Vermont and Washington, D.C., who have aggressive renewable energy goals, but they're up against challenges with renewable projects being approved. That made Mike and I wonder, do you agree with that video's assessment? Is that situation true for Michigan?
It really is a cool video. I enjoyed watching that. I think it is accurate in many ways. It illustrates the challenges that they have in Vermont and DC, but I think all states are really facing similar situations. When you think about what we're trying to achieve with our aggressive renewable energy goals, it's going to be a challenge to put more wind and solar on the system and move away from coal and natural gas. It's a big task, and the grid really wasn't designed for this shift. So what we're having to do now is we've got to plan for not only a shift in the type of generation that's on the system, but actually a shift in the amount of electricity that's consumed. And both of those things are happening at the same time. So in order to really make that all happen, we see the need for more transmission to be built to move the power and more power over larger distances.
So what is the story in Michigan, Simon? Do we have the appropriate infrastructure in place to support our renewable energy future? And we know that GM, Ford, everybody really plugged in. We even have battery plants going in around the Lansing area. So can the capacity of Michigan's current grid handle the addition of all this renewable energy, EVs, and all the rest?
You mentioned the GM announcements, which are really exciting. I think it's a sign of the reality of the electrification of vehicles and other things that's coming. I think another thing to note is that the grid, as we know it, has been considered one of the greatest achievements of engineering for a long time. Just thinking about what it can do instantaneously, delivering power from point A to point B, being interconnected with other states and utilities. It's really a remarkable feat. Having said that, we are also in a great position here in Michigan. ITC has invested a lot in the system. We've really improved reliability. We're in a good place today. But as I said before, it really wasn't designed for what we're about to throw at it from the renewables, electrification, distributed generation. This is why we're really calling for the modernization of the grid. And on top of that, we have other things coming at us, like Governor Whitmer signed an order a couple of years ago to commit the state to be carbon neutral by 2050. That's a big goal. We've seen our major utility customers set their own goals for being either net zero or carbon neutral on shorter and shorter timeframes. So these are very aggressive goals, and we're going to have to do something to the grid other than what we have today. And ultimately, we think we need more transmission because the wind and the sun aren't really distributed evenly across all states. So, if you think about when the wind isn't blowing in Michigan, it's probably blowing somewhere else, and we're going to have to tap into that. Similarly with the sun, the sun isn't always shining everywhere, and it doesn't shine, and the wind doesn't blow when you may need it. And that's really where the transmission system can step in and allows you to tap into your neighbor's system and vice versa to take care of the capacity that you need. So at the end of the day, what we're working on is developing a system that can handle that shift.
So do we need a lot more renewables to replace the retiring generation like coal plants and eventually natural gas plants too?
There are currently quite a big queue or lineup of generators that are looking to locate here in Michigan. I think it's in the 10 to 15,000 megawatts. Put that in perspective, it's almost equal to the existing amount of generation that's on our system at peak demand times in the summer. So it's a huge volume that's coming, and it's coming for these carbon goals. It's coming because of economic reasons. It's just cheaper right now to build solar than it is to build something else. So, it's partly environmental aspiration, and it's part economics, it's part aging infrastructure. It's all of these things sort of coming together. And, we're going to have more of this renewable generation to meet these goals. And if you're going to want the renewables, you're going to have to love transmission, because that's the role that transmission plays.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I wanted to ask too is where are these renewables located, and how far are they from the population centers? I mean, we've all heard about the wind turbines up in the Thumb area. When I was flying in over Lake Michigan recently, I didn't realize there's a lot of wind power down in southwest Michigan as well, right?
Yes, the wind for about 10 years or so was really the leading renewable that was coming into our state. And as you said, the Thumb region has been evaluated as one of the best places for wind in the state, which is why we see most of it in that region. But there are other parts of the state that are good for wind and have wind. More recently, most of the projects coming online are solar, and that tends to be a little bit more dispersed geographically just by nature of the form of generation. So I think we see this evolution, and ultimately I think a balance of the geography will be here in Michigan.
So tell us a little bit about how electric transmission and the flexibility within the grid that you're working on, how can that help us meet our renewable energy goals?
I think, as I mentioned, it really comes down to the fact that when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing, we've got to get power from somewhere. And transmission system can really serve that need to be able to tap into other areas, whether it's within the state, maybe the east side of the state is seeing one set of conditions and the west side is seeing something different, or it could be across state lines. And that happens today on our system in a less renewable concentrated system. And it's only going to happen more when we have more renewables. And when you think about the plans that automakers have around the EVs, and as I said earlier, it's becoming real. Just the number of new models that we're seeing, and the number of vehicles being produced, and the investments that the automakers are making, we're going to need more power, more electricity to charge those cars, and that sort of being stacked on top of a more dynamic system of renewables really explains the need for transmission to meet the goals.
So are we on track to be able to build all the transmission that will be needed to meet our future energy goals?
It takes us about 7 to 10 years to build a brand new transmission line from the point that we conceive of the idea, putting it through the planning process, designing it, actually constructing it, and then putting it in service. It's a significant amount of lead time. It's a little bit longer than it takes to build a new wind or solar farm. So we have to plan ahead. We have to look further down the road to make sure that the work that we're doing today will be ready for the future state. So that's one of the things that we really focused on is the approach to planning, making sure that transmission is being planned in a more broad manner, not just taking care of problems on a one-off basis, because we have to have this more holistic view. We have to look down the road. And really that's sort of the heart and soul of how we plan the system. And if we act now, there's enough time. There's a strong system that we have in Michigan. We will be able to collaborate with our industry partners and work on the transmission that's needed. So I think we're in a good place. It's really an exciting time for our industry and for the economy. I think we're on the verge of some major shifts, and I think that's going to bring some great opportunities for our state, both in terms of the environment and the economy, jobs, just to name a few. So at ITC, we're really working hard to make sure that Michiganders in Michigan have the power that they need and sort of have the peace of mind that things are taken care of, and that we've got a great future ahead of us.
Yeah, one thing, Simon, I wanted to ask you, whenever I talk to people about ITC, people see ITC and they wonder what's that. And I tell them, well, they own the transmission. They essentially own the big beefy parts of the grid between generation and the local lines in your neighborhood. And people have asked me before, why is it a good idea to have a separate company owning that? Why don't we just have the utilities own everything? So talk a little bit about the advantages of having a separate company owning the transmission system.
That's a great question. We are unique in that sense in Michigan. There aren't a lot of other states that have a similar model. And from our perspective, having a company that's singularly focused on transmission, that's an expert, that isn't competing for capital. There's so many needs in terms of investment, whether it's the distribution system, the generation system, the transmission system. We're just focused on transmission, and we become experts at it. And that's all we do. And the results have been a significant improvement in reliability in our state. So the transmission outages on our systems here in Michigan have decreased significantly. And so the reliability component alone, the weather resistance that we've seen. So we've had these huge storms that have come through in the last few years. Our system has really stood up because of all the work that we've done on the system over the last 10, 15 years. So I think the model has proven itself out here in the state. And I think moving forward, it's a huge asset for our state when we think about economic development and shopping around the benefits and the qualities that our state has. This has been a great benefit and a great asset for the state of Michigan.
Let me also ask you, because I know this is something that's on people's minds these days, and I think we've discussed this before. I have toured your facility. I've been to your control room. But we had one of our Richard Steenan on, who is one of our cybersecurity experts. And I know from our past conversations that you guys get hit all the time, or at least not hit, but bad guys are trying to get in all the time. And one of the things that he mentioned, and unless this is something you don't really want to talk about, is that with the Russians now getting ready to go into Ukraine, there's been a lot of talk, at least among the cybersecurity folks, that there are, Russian stuff planted on the networks that they can shut everything down. And I thought I'd come straight to you and say, are you concerned about that at all?
Well, cybersecurity is always something we are very concerned about. One of the benefits of the blackout of 2003 was that some mandatory reliability standards were put in place, including those that cover cybersecurity. And since that time, all utilities, not just ITC, but transmission owners, distribution companies, generators, have had to adhere to some pretty strict and tight requirements, protocols around cybersecurity. So we're in a much better place today than we were a decade, 15 years ago, which is great. Having said that, the bad guys are always looking to, get one step above us. So it's a constant process of continuous improvement and comparing notes with our neighbors, with the various levels of government, practicing what to do if something does happen, just ongoing hardening of the system. So, it is a real concern, but the industry, I'm proud to say, has done a tremendous amount of work on this front, and that gives us some comfort.
Yeah.
All right. Well, in terms of the future, if there's much more distributed generation coming, that sort of depends on public policy. Obviously, the automakers are pushing electric vehicles. They're 1%, 2%, 3% of the market now, and they're going to be a lot more than that if the car makers are right in what they're doing. What's the effect of all this going to be on the grid between distributed generation and people charging electric cars every day, well, hopefully every night, right, to balance out the load? But what do you see ahead in the next 10 years or so in terms of how we keep up with these changes?
I think that's the $1 million question: is what is the net effect going to be? And I think the net effect is an increased use of electricity. I think probably some more efficiency around how we use electricity. I think maybe a smoothing out to a certain extent of our electrical use. Right now, we have these daily patterns of ups and downs, and I think we'll see some smoothing out, maybe using some more of the capacity that we have on an ongoing basis, as opposed to just having these peak moments of demand. So I think there's going to be a lot of movement, more two-way flow of electricity. Typically in the past, it's sort of been just one direction from where it's generated to where it's consumed. I think we're going to see bi-directional flows that we're not accustomed to. So there's a lot, I think, that's going to happen simultaneously. And the great news is, as I said before, the grid is an engineering marvel, and we've got some great engineers in this country and around the world that are going to figure this out. And I think the grid 2.0 is going to be even more mind-blowing than the grid 1.0.